The Frankfurt deal was finally closed. 6 brutal days of negotiations, 3 hours of sleep per night, and I'd secured the European expansion my boss had been chasing for years. My body ached from the 9-hour flight home, but adrenaline kept me upright as I steered the rental car through my parents' quiet Denver suburb. I'd promised Mom I'd stop by before heading to my apartment. She'd want the details, maybe fuss over me, maybe load me up with leftovers. The sun was sinking, painting the houses along Birch Lane in gold when I turned onto my parents' street. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Dad had finally trimmed the bushes that used to crawl over the garage. A small miracle. I smoothed my charcoal skirt, winced at my pinching pumps, and clicked the remote. The garage door creaked upward, then my heart plummeted. The space was empty. Not just empty, vacant, stripped. No gleaming black Challenger where I'd left it. Just the lawnmower and a few rusting garden tools. My suitcase thudded to the concrete as the remote slipped from my hand. No. No, no, no. The words clawed out of my throat as I stumbled into the house, pulse roaring in my ears. The kitchen was too quiet. Around the oak table sat Mom, Dad, and my younger sister Sloane. Their faces wore the guilty stiffness of people caught rehearsing excuses. "Avery, honey," Mom began, voice-coated in sugar. "Don't overreact." "Where's my car?" My voice cracked low and sharp. Sloane's chin lifted, her tone practiced from years of breezy entitlement. "It's just temporary, Lena. I'll pay it back." "Pay what back?" Dad finally spoke, still staring at his hands. We took it to Cornerstone Pawn, $45,000. The room tilted. "You did what?" "It's a loan." Sloane rushed in. "Not a sale. My cosmetics line is revolutionary. Once it launches, you'll get your car back with interest." Her words blurred into noise. Memories flashed instead. Grandpa's calloused hands guiding mine over an engine when I was 9, his voice steady. "Cars are more than machines, Lena. They're proof of patience, proof of dreams solid enough to touch." Buying that Challenger after 6 years of 70-hour work weeks had been more than a purchase. It was validation. A visible symbol that my sacrifices hadn't been meaningless. And they'd pawned it like a spare toaster. "That wasn't yours to touch," I whispered. Mom's lips thinned. "Family helps family. You make plenty of money." "Sloane deserves her chance." "You forged my title?" "Used my spare key." My chest burned. "That's fraud." Dad flinched. Mom stayed rigid. Sloane twirled her hair, defiance faltering. My phone buzzed. A notification from my insurance company, lien placed against a vehicle. The words stabbed through my fog. This wasn't just betrayal. It was criminal. I turned to the door. "You have 30 days, I said evenly. "Get it back or I press charges." Mom gasped. "Charges against your own family?" "Family doesn't steal from each other." I slammed the door behind me, their stunned faces etched in my mind. The next morning, I stood inside Cornerstone Pawn blazer, buttoned tight like armor. The air reeked of desperation and cheap pine cleaner. The man behind the counter, Gordon, slid the contract across the glass. Loan amount $45,000, fees $3,000. I skimmed the fine print, every finance class I'd ever taken clicking into place. $3,000 in fees, and if it isn't repaid, 35 days auction. He tapped the clause with one thick finger. Payment deadline October 3rd. My eyes froze on the signature line, my name curved across it, but not mine. Too stiff, missing the upward flick I always left on the last letter. "This isn't my signature." Gordon's jaw tightened. "If you're alleging fraud, I'm stating it." I slid my license across the glass. "Compare them." He examined it, unease spreading across his face. "I'll need to involve my manager." "Please do. And while you're at it, pull the footage, because I was in Frankfurt, Germany." Minutes later, the truth sat heavy in my chest. My parents hadn't just betrayed me, they'd committed a felony. Back home, I pulled the family photo album from the shelf. Kendra's 16th birthday, lavish professional photographer cake taller than her. My 16th absent. I'd been working weekends at the mall to save for college. Kendra's graduation limousine champagne, my own college ceremony. Empty chairs where Mom and Dad should have been. They claimed flight delays. Miraculously, they'd made it to Kendra's dance recital the next day. The pattern screamed from every page, years of sacrifice erased in favor of her spotlight. The phone rang. "Uncle Ray, I heard what they did. Your mom called me first, tried to spin it, said you're overreacting. Lena, this isn't right." His voice steadied me more than I expected. When we hung up, I sat in silence, the album still open on my lap. The pictures blurred my throat raw. I wasn't just fighting for a car, I was fighting for the respect I'd never been given. And for once, I wasn't going to let them bury it under family comes first. Cornerstone had given me 35 days. By the time I uncovered the forged signature, 10 were already gone. That left 25. Every hour felt like sand slipping through my fists. Dad tried the bank first. He came home with a folder of forms, his shoulders sagging. "They'll approve a home equity line," he said, "but it'll take 2 weeks." 2 weeks, half my countdown swallowed by paperwork. Meanwhile, Sloane listed her BMW online. She took glossy photos, edited them until the paint looked like liquid glass, then posted with hashtags about simplifying. The truth was obvious. No one bit until she slashed the price and a college kid handed her a cashier's check. Watching her smile through clenched teeth as she surrendered the keys, I felt no satisfaction. Just the bitter symmetry of her losing a car to save the one she stole. Mom pulled velvet boxes from the top drawer of her dresser. Grandma's silver candlesticks, a pearl necklace Dad had given her years ago. She wrapped them carefully in tissue. At Fletcher's Antiques, the clerk barely looked before offering $3,000. Mom nodded, lips tight. For my part, I broke into my emergency savings. $6,000 vanished with a few clicks. It didn't feel like helping. It felt like throwing water at a fire that refused to die. Uncle Ray added $5,000, scribbling the check like it pained him. "Family helps family," he muttered, but his eyes locked on Dad. "Not by stealing, by paying." Together we scraped $15,000. Enough for the pawn shop to pause the auction clock. I carried the stamped deposit receipt back like a sacred object. That night I collapsed on my couch phone, buzzing with congratulatory texts about Frankfurt. My colleagues thought I was celebrating. Instead, I stared at the receipt knowing we'd only bought time. A week later, I spotted Sloane across the mall food court. No designer jacket, no glittering nails, just black slacks, white blouse, and a cheap tote. She hesitated outside Nordstrom's employee entrance, then vanished inside. That night, she called. 8 hours on my feet, she said softly. Smiling at people who treat you like furniture. Is this what you've done all these years? Yes. I used to call you boring. Thought you didn't know how to live. A pause. Turns out you knew how to survive. Her words landed heavier than I wanted them to. I had no reply. Mom wasn't adjusting as easily. She found stacks of papers in Sloane's drawer, unpaid credit cards, buy now, pay later accounts, personal loans. Nearly $80,000 in debt. She sat at the kitchen table with them spread like funeral programs. We had no idea, she whispered. You never asked, I said. Dad stared at the bills, his face hollow. For once he didn't defend her. As the final deadline crept closer, Cornerstone called. A new buyer had offered cash for my Challenger. First full payment would take it. Dad begged for 2 days. The pawnbroker was unmoved. Panic ripped through us. We were $3,000 short. Mom sold her diamond earrings. I maxed out my last credit line. Sloane drained the remainder of her savings. We still didn't make it. That night, the house was silent. Plates of food sat untouched. The air was heavy with defeat. Then the doorbell rang. Uncle Ray stepped in, checkbook in hand. Family helps family, he said again, but this time the words rang clean. He filled the gap without hesitation. The next morning, we all crowded into the bank like witnesses at a trial. Dad's hand shook as he signed the wire. The manager's keyboard clicks were louder than my pulse. The clock on the wall inched toward noon. At 11:42, the confirmation popped on the screen, payment received. The air left the room in one collective exhale. That afternoon, I walked into Cornerstone, receipt in hand. The pawnbroker slid the keys across the counter. Cold metal touched my palm, heavier than ever. Outside, the Challenger gleamed polished to showroom shine. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, my chest was hollow. I traced the hood with trembling fingers. Grandpa's words whispered back, it's what they represent that matters. Right now, the car represented sacrifice twisted into betrayal and a debt that stretched far beyond money. I started the engine. The roar filled my chest, but the relief never came. The Challenger sat safe in my garage again, but peace didn't ride home with it. Every time I looked at the keys, I remembered the forged signature, the pawn ticket, the lies. A car can be polished back to perfection. Trust can't. Sunday dinner came anyway. Mom's text read, steaks at 5, Dad's grilling, like nothing had happened. I thought about refusing, but silence would have screamed louder. I typed back, I'll be there. The house smelled of rosemary and smoke when I walked in. Dad stood by the grill spatula, frozen midair when he saw me. Mom twisted a dish towel in the doorway. Sloane arrived late, sunglasses hiding swollen eyes. We sat like strangers, pressed into a play, props and all. For minutes, the only sound was the scrape of forks. I sliced my steak into neat cubes, the knife's rhythm keeping me from exploding. Finally, Mom spoke. Sloane's having a rough time. Everyone stumbles. What matters is family. I set my knife down. This isn't about stumbling, it's about theft. Dad's voice was gravel. We thought we were giving her a chance. At my expense. I kept my tone even, sharp as glass. You didn't just take a car, you took what it represented. 6 years of sacrifice. Mom flinched. It's just a vehicle. No. My chest burned. It was proof. Proof I hadn't wasted my 20s buried in spreadsheets. Proof Grandpa's faith in me meant something. The table sank into silence until the doorbell rang. Dad returned with Uncle Ray behind him. He didn't wait for pleasantries. He sat beside me, arms crossed. What were you thinking, Victor? Ray demanded. His eyes cut from Dad to me. Show them. I pulled a folder from my bag. Documents slid across the wood, title records, fraud statutes, pawn shop regulations. This is a felony, I said flatly. Title fraud, identity theft, you could face prison. Mom's face drained. You wouldn't? I don't want to. But you need to understand what you did. Dad's eyes glistened with something I hadn't seen before, shame real and heavy. What have we done to you, to us? Sloane finally removed her glasses, mascara streaking. It's my fault. I pushed them. I told them you'd forgive me once the business worked. I never thought it would collapse so fast. Ray leaned forward. So, what's the plan? Because Cornerstone won't be the last bill breathing down your neck. I exhaled. We already saved the car, now we deal with what comes next. $48,000 doesn't vanish, someone's paying it back. Dad's hands trembled on the table. Mom dabbed her eyes. Sloane looked down at her bitten nails. No more speeches, I said. From here on, promises are written, legally binding. The next day I sat across from Rachel Holman, a sharp-eyed attorney recommended by Ray. She skimmed the folder I'd carried like a weapon. You've got grounds for charges, she said. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, all serious. I swallowed hard. I'm not ready to send my parents to prison. What else can we do? A repayment agreement, she replied. Enforceable in court. If they break it, you don't argue at the dinner table, you go straight to collections. It gives you leverage. That night I called Dad. If you mean to make this right, we'll put it in writing. 2 years, monthly payments, interest, no excuses. There was a long pause, then his voice rough. We'll sign. A week later we gathered again, but this time around contracts, not roast chicken. Rachel sat at the head of the table, pen tapping against her pad. Dad signed first, his hand shaking but steady enough. Mom signed next, whispering, we'll honor this. Finally, Sloane picked up the pen. Her eyes met mine for the first time without defiance. I'll pay back my share, she said. It won't be fast, but it'll be real. When the last signature dried, Rachel gathered the pages into a neat stack. Now it's law, she said simply. I tucked the contract into my bag, its weight steadier than any apology. For the first time since that empty garage, I felt the ground shift. The balance of power was no longer hidden in guilt trips or favors, it was written in ink. That night, back in my apartment, I stared at the Challenger through my window. Its paint caught the streetlight, glossy and black. Grandpa's words came back again. It's what they represent that matters. Maybe now, finally, it could represent something new, my boundaries carved, not with pleas, but with signatures. And maybe, just maybe, it could carry me forward instead of chaining me to the past. The contracts were signed, but paper didn't erase history. Every time my parents' names sat beside mine in black ink, I felt both relief and bitterness. They finally acknowledged what they'd done, but only because I'd forced them. For a few weeks, the payments arrived as promised. Small transfers at first, but steady. Notifications pinged on my phone like proof that maybe this family could learn. I tried to let it soften me, but I never let my guard down. Then Mom called one evening, her voice hushed. Lena, we found more. More what? Loan papers. In Sloane's things, credit cards, buy now, pay later accounts, personal loans, almost $80,000. I pressed my forehead against the cold window. So she didn't just gamble with my car, she gambled with her whole future. We had no idea, Mom whispered. You never asked, I replied. Dad's silence on the other end spoke louder than any words. The next Sunday, we gathered for a family reunion. Cousins, aunts, neighbors, all packed into the backyard. Picnic tables creaked under potato salad and beer cans. For a while, it almost felt normal, until the whispers started. Aunt Patricia cornered me near the grill, wine glass sloshing. You've made your point, Lena. Time to let it go. Family needs harmony. Before I could answer, Uncle Ray appeared at my side, steady as stone. No harmony without accountability, he said flatly. Then Sloane did something I never expected. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but loud enough to silence the yard. I manipulated them, she said. I told Mom and Dad to pawn Lena's car. I thought she'd forgive me once my business worked. But I was wrong. They chose to betray her. We're all accountable. The air shifted. Aunt Patricia's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Cousin Mike gave me a slow, solemn nod. For once, the family's eyes weren't on me as the serious one. They were on Sloane, watching her admit the truth. It didn't erase the damage, but it cracked the silence that had always protected her. Later that night, Mom tried again. Will you leave us a spare key for the Challenger, just in case of emergency? I held her gaze until the request shriveled in the air. No, not anymore. Boundaries aren't explained, they're lived. Meanwhile, Dad's overtime shifts took a toll. His knees were swollen, his face drawn. Mom sold more jewelry heirlooms she once swore she'd never part with. Sloane kept showing up at her retail job, cheeks flushed from standing on her feet all day. The effort mattered, but the math was brutal. Every time I checked the repayment ledger, it felt like staring at a mountain that refused to shrink. One night, Dad sat beside me on the porch, the summer air heavy with cut grass. We failed you long before we took your car, he said, his voice raw. We praised Sloane's dreams and dismissed yours. You never asked for much, so we thought you didn't need much. The words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I had carried the family's weight quietly, and they had mistaken silence for strength. I didn't answer. Some confessions don't need replies. 2 weeks later, Cornerstone called again. A buyer was sniffing around, cash in hand. First full payment locks the deal, the broker said flatly. Panic returned like a shadow I thought we'd shaken. We scrambled once more. Mom sold her diamond earrings. I maxed out another credit line. Sloane handed over the last of her savings. Still, we were short. That night, the house felt like a tomb, until the doorbell rang. Uncle Ray stepped in, checkbook already open. Family helps family, he said again, but this time with no irony. He filled the gap without hesitation. The next morning, we crowded into the bank again. Dad's hand trembled as he signed the wire transfer. The clock ticked toward noon. At 11:42, the confirmation popped on the screen, payment received. We exhaled as one. When I returned to Cornerstone, the pawnbroker slid the keys across the counter. The Challenger gleamed in the lot, detailed and shining like nothing had happened. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like ash. I slid into the driver's seat, fingers tracing the wheel. The engine rumbled to life, steady and strong. Tears blurred the road as I pulled away. The car was home, but the story wasn't finished. The Challenger was back in my garage, safe under its own alarm system, but the house I grew up in felt like a stranger's. The contracts had created order, but not peace. Trust wasn't something you could wire transfer or notarize. It had to be lived day by day. The first repayments landed on schedule. Notifications chimed on my phone, small amounts, but steady. For a while, I let myself believe. Then reality cracked the surface again. Mom discovered more of Sloane's debt, credit cards tucked into handbags, installment accounts. She'd never mentioned another personal loan in collections. The total was staggering. Almost $80,000, Mom whispered as she held the papers, her face pale. You wanted me to leave them a spare key? I reminded her quietly. Would you trust them with yours? She didn't answer. Family dinner resumed with forced cheer. Dad carved the roast while Mom poured wine, pretending things were normal. But the elephant sat heavy between us. It wasn't until dessert that Dad spoke. We're trying, Lena. The overtime, the payments? I know it doesn't fix what we did. I set my fork down. It's not about money, it's about respect. For once, I need you to understand that. Sloane shifted in her seat, eyes down. I do understand, more than I used to. Her words were soft, almost fragile. I studied her, waiting for the smirk that always followed. It never came. The real test came at the next family reunion. Relatives crowded the backyard, laughter loud, gossip louder. But the whispers about Lena taking things too far were sharp enough to hear. Aunt Patricia cornered me near the potato salad. You've made your point, she said, glass tilting in her hand. Time to let it go. Family needs harmony. Before I could respond, Uncle Ray stepped in. Harmony without accountability is just silence, he said flatly. Then Sloane surprised me. She stood in front of everyone, her voice shaking but steady. I manipulated them. I told Mom and Dad to pawn Lena's car. I thought she'd forgive me after, but I was wrong. They betrayed her. We're all responsible. The yard went silent. Patricia blinked, speechless. Cousin Mike gave me a nod that carried weight. For once, the spotlight was on Sloane, not as the golden child, but as the one admitting failure. It didn't heal the wound, but it shifted the ground. Weeks passed. Dad kept grinding through night shifts, his knees swollen. Mom pawned more jewelry. Sloane clocked retail hours, her manicures stripped down to bare nails. And me, I kept my boundaries. When Mom asked again about a spare key for the Challenger, I met her eyes until she looked away. No, I said simply. Respect lives in small moments. At work, my boss Palmer pulled me aside. You've been carrying a lot, he said. But I've also seen how steady you've been under pressure. Frankfurt proved that. If you want the director track, keep this up. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. My career was still mine, untangled from their chaos. One evening, I found Sloane waiting outside my apartment. She looked smaller, dressed in plain clothes, her hair pulled back. I'm sorry, she said before I could speak. Not just for the car. For years of treating you like the boring one. I see now you were the strong one. Her voice wavered. Earning something feels different than taking it. I studied her. For once, there was no entitlement in her eyes. Just tired honesty. Keep proving it, I said finally. She nodded. The repayments continued. Not enough to erase the debt quickly, but steady. And steady mattered more than grand gestures. The Challenger sat in its locked space gleaming under the fluorescent light. Every time I touched the keys, I reminded myself this isn't about a car. It's about drawing a line in ink and refusing to let anyone cross it again. A year had passed since the day I found the empty garage. Seasons had rolled by, repayments had stacked up month after month, and the Challenger still sat safe in its own locked bay. The car was back, but it wasn't the same, neither was I. Dad finally built a separate structure for it, a small garage with its own alarm system. He handed me the code, his voice low. Only you know this one. His eyes carried no expectation, just a quiet plea for trust. Mom had changed too. She asked now about everything. Would you mind if I borrow your jacket? Can I use this pan? The questions were small, but they mattered. Each one an acknowledgement that my belongings weren't community property anymore. And Sloane? She was no longer the girl in designer heels and endless credit lines. She worked retail, kept a budget, and sent me $300 each month. Not much compared to what she owed, but it came like clockwork. Last month she showed me her spreadsheet, pride flickering in her voice. Earning feels different, she said, than being handed it. Uncle Ray rode shotgun one weekend. He patted the dashboard as we wound through the mountains. Your grandfather would be proud, he said. Not just of the car, of the woman you've become. His words sat with me as the Rockies unfolded ahead, peaks glowing gold in morning light. The Challenger hummed beneath me, steady alive. Sometimes I drove out to the overlook, parked at the edge, and sat in silence. I remembered Grandpa's words, cars are just steel and chrome. It's what they represent that matters. For years the Challenger had represented sacrifice, then betrayal. Now finally it represented boundaries. It represented survival that had turned into respect. One afternoon I brought the finance class I volunteer with to see it. 20 young women crowded around, eyes wide. Melissa, a shy teenager, lingered after the others left. My dad used to work on old cars, she said. Before the divorce, my mom sold his tools to pay for my sister's dance lessons. He never forgave her. I let her sit in the driver's seat, her hands light on the wheel. Her smile stretched wider than the windshield. Dreams need protecting, I told her, echoing Grandpa's wisdom. And so do you. The last family gathering felt different too. There was no showy meal, no forced laughter. Just Dad grilling Mom, setting out plates, Sloane helping without complaint. When I finished eating, Dad led me to the garage. It'll never be enough, he said, his eyes tired but sincere. But I want you to know we're trying. I know, I said, it was the truth. Forgiveness wasn't complete, it might never be, but there was effort. And effort mattered. On the anniversary of the Frankfurt deal, I drove into the mountains alone. The road curved like a ribbon, trees spilling toward the sky. I rolled down the windows, let the wind rush through my hair, and pressed the accelerator. The engine roared, a sound that filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in a long time, freedom. For the first time since I was 9 years old, standing beside Grandpa as he leaned over an engine, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. The road stretched open ahead, wide and endless. And this time I was driving it on my own terms. Story 2. My name is Kevin, and I'm 27. Until 2 years ago, I clung to the hope that my family would wake up and stop treating me like the designated scapegoat. But hope doesn't change people, they often dig in their heels. When they do, you've got two choices: keep hoping, or remember who you really are. I was the eldest of three, me, Rachel, the golden child, and Eric, the baby brother, who was too young to matter in our family's power plays. From the outside, we looked like any normal siblings, smiling in holiday photos, trading polite comments on Facebook. Behind the scenes, though, I was the one cleaning up every mess. When Rachel totaled her car in college, I emptied my savings to help her hush it up so she wouldn't lose her internship. When Mom forgot to pay the electric bill 3 months in a row and blamed it on Eric's marathon gaming sessions, I covered the late fees, no thanks. Just a perfunctory nod and that vague family duty line. I did it all, every favor, every dollar, every ounce of emotional labor, because I believed if I kept showing up, they'd eventually see me as more than an ATM and errand boy. That illusion exploded last November on what should have been just another ordinary afternoon. Rachel had just announced her engagement to Brandon, and I realized I'd been invisible the entire time. We weren't close, but he always struck me as one of those harmlessly bland types. He wore both shoes to Thanksgiving and said things like, killer spread. See, still, I was genuinely happy for her. I thought this might be the moment we all turned a corner. I texted her congratulations, offered to help however I could, and even volunteered to handle their honeymoon costs as a wedding gift. She responded with a half-hearted checks, and I didn't think much of it. Then 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Mom while I was wrapping up work. I still don't know if she meant to let the venom in her voice slip through or if she genuinely didn't care that I heard it. Don't even think about showing up to the wedding. She snapped before I could say hello. Rachel's finally going to have the perfect day she deserves, and we're not going to let you ruin it. I was quiet for a second, trying to figure out what she was talking about. I wasn't planning on making a speech or doing anything flashy. I was just going to show up, clap at the right moments, maybe hug a few people. Ruin it. How, I asked slowly. Her voice dropped into that sickly sweet tone she always used when she wanted to disguise something cruel. Kevin, you've never exactly looked the part. You know that, right? You always dress like you're going to a job interview, and not a good one. And the way you hover around, it's off-putting. Rachel doesn't want you in the photos. She asked me to tell you, and frankly, I agree. I couldn't breathe for a second. It felt like my ears were ringing. All the years I'd bent over backward for them. All the effort to be supportive. And now I was being told I didn't even deserve a seat at the wedding, that I'd somehow ruined their perfect little family image by simply existing in the background. I could hear Rachel's voice in the background, to light dismissive laughing like this whole thing was some kind of inside joke. Tell him he can send a gift, though, she called out. He's still good for that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell or defend myself. I just smiled. It was the same smile I used to give my boss when he tried to dump his work on me. The one that says you have no idea what I'm about to do. Sure, I said, my tone light. I understand. She hung up without another word. I opened my laptop, logged into the joint account I'd set up for the honeymoon gift, and reversed the transfer, $4,200 back into my pocket in 5 seconds. I took a screenshot of the reversal and texted it to Mom with a simple caption. I wouldn't want to ruin anything. No reply, but I know she saw it. She always reads messages obsessively. Now here's the part they really don't know. Last year I quietly invested in a chain of mid-tier venues that were struggling post-pandemic. One of them happened to be the exact location Rachel bragged about booking on Instagram. Lakeview Ridge. The one with the big white gazebo and overpriced brunch menu. The moment I recognized it in her post, I double-checked my emails. Yep, it was under our portfolio. Not only did I partially own it, I had final sign-off power on all large events held there, including, say, weddings. At first I considered pulling the plug immediately, just canceling the booking, watching them scramble, but that felt too easy, too quick. They wouldn't feel it. They wouldn't understand it. I wanted them to stew in their own smugness a little longer. I wanted them to post their countdown stories, their dress fittings, their seating chart arguments. I wanted them to laugh behind my back just a few more times. So instead, I've been watching, patiently waiting. I made a few quiet calls to the event coordinator at Lakeview Ridge asking to be notified if there were any concerns or issues with the Carsons' wedding reservation. I reviewed the contract and let me tell you it's airtight except for one tiny clause buried deep in the fine print. Full payment is required 10 days before the event or the booking is considered forfeited. Not delayed, not postponed. Forfeited. The wedding is in 12 days, and as of this morning, no final payment has been submitted. I didn't need to do anything yet. Just wait. Watch. Let them keep treating me like a footnote, like a burden. They'd rather crop out of the pictures. Let them keep smiling for the camera, completely unaware that the floor they're standing on was laid by the one person they deemed unworthy of standing beside them. It was amazing how quickly people forgot where their money came from once it was no longer being handed to them in silence. I hadn't heard a single word from Rachel or my mom since that phone call. Not even a half-hearted. Maybe you could come to the rehearsal dinner as a peace offering. Nothing, just silence and smugness. But that's the thing about silence. It lets you hear everything they don't say out loud. I spent the next few days doing something I hadn't done in a long time, living my life without them. I hit the gym again, cleaned up my apartment, took myself out to dinner for once. My phone wasn't blowing up with requests for favors or emergency money transfers. It was peaceful, quiet in the kind of way that feels earned, like the calm before a controlled storm. But then 5 days before the wedding, I got a notification from the venue's coordinator, Amy. She's been with Lakeview Ridge for years and has seen more family meltdowns than a therapist. She's sharp composed and a little too observant for her own good. Her message was short and polite, but the subtext was crystal clear. Hey Kevin, just checking in. The Carson party still hasn't submitted the final payment. I've sent 2 reminders with no reply. Let me know how you want to handle it. Since it's close to the deadline, I called her back that afternoon and we talked through it. I kept my tone casual, professional. If it's not paid by the deadline, we'll consider the booking void per policy. Just follow the contract. Amy hesitated. You sure? I mean, they're really banking on this thing. They've got like 15 vendors scheduled a whole live string quartet and there's talk of releasing doves during the vows. I smiled faintly. Doves classy. She laughed quietly. Okay, I'll follow protocol deadlines in 2 days. Now I could have warned them. I could have texted Rachel a simple, hey, just so you know your payment's late. But I didn't, because they made it clear I wasn't family. Not important enough to stand in a photo, not important enough to warn a chair, just a walking wallet with a pulse. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to interfere. I was going to let the natural consequences of their carelessness do all the work for me. On the morning of the deadline, I took the day off work and treated myself to a good breakfast. Eggs, coffee, extra crispy bacon. I checked my email around noon. Still nothing. No payment, no message, no Hail Mary. Oh my God, we forgot. Just radio silence. That night, Amy marked the booking as canceled in our system. At 7:18 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30s later. Another call. Same number. I finally picked up. Hi, is this Kevin? This is Teresa. I'm Rachel's wedding planner. I nearly laughed. Of course it was. Yes, I said, keeping my voice neutral. So, we're just trying to sort out a minor issue with the venue. I understand there was some kind of system error and the final payment didn't go through. Probably a glitch with our account, but we were hoping to confirm everything is still on track for Saturday. I leaned back in my chair, glanced at the ceiling. No system error. The payment deadline passed last night. The booking has been released. Silence. I could hear her breathing, and in the background the muffled sound of someone arguing. Then her voice returned thin and nervous. But surely you can make an exception, right? I mean, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. The bride's already got her gown. Guests are flying in. Teresa, I interrupted gently. I understand, but the contract is the contract. If they wanted it locked in, they should have paid on time. We've been more than generous with reminders. She stammered a bit before trailing off with a shaky, I'll talk to Rachel. The next call came less than an hour later. This time it was Mom. Kevin. She barked. No greeting. What is going on with the venue? Rachel is in tears. They said the booking was canceled because of you. I raised an eyebrow. Me, I didn't cancel anything. The deadline passed. I just happened to know the coordinator. You knew and you didn't say anything. You let this happen. I let what happened. You mean I didn't step in and cover for your mistake again? There was a bit of silence, then her voice turned cold. Do you really hate your sister that much? No, I said slowly, clearly. I just finally decided to stop letting you all treat me like I'm disposable. You said I'd ruin the photos, so I took myself out of the picture. You always have to make it about you. She spat. No, I said again quieter this time. You did. You made it about me the second you decided I wasn't worth a chair at your perfect wedding. I'm just following your lead. She hung up without another word that night. I got a text from Rachel. No greeting, no emoji, just this. You seriously couldn't have warned us. And then a second later. Wow, you're a bitter little man. I didn't reply. I didn't need to because the next part that was entirely in my hands. Now the venue was gone. Their dream wedding had no foundation. Vendors were pulling out dozens were staying caged, and they still had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went. Because while they were scrambling to find a last-minute location, I was sitting on a little secret. They thought the worst had already happened. They didn't realize that I wasn't done yet, not even close. The following morning, I woke up to a dozen new texts and 3 missed calls. 2 from Rachel, 1 from Brandon. The texts ranged from thinly veiled guilt trips. This is still family, Kevin. No matter what happened to flat-out insults, I can't believe you're so petty. You'd sabotage your own sister's wedding. I read them all over coffee, scrolled through without reacting. They didn't know the half of it. See, Rachel and Brandon had spent the last year parading this wedding around like it was some royal event. Magazine-style engagement photos, a custom website with a countdown, a color palette, with 4 shades of soft champagne beside. The venue wasn't just a pretty location, it was the entire brand. Lakeview Ridge was the backdrop in every one of their online posts. Their Pinterest board, even the RSVP envelopes, had a watercolor painting of a gazebo. It was a curated fantasy, and they built it on borrowed money and other people's generosity, including mine. They hadn't told anyone I was paying for the honeymoon. They took the money, smiled for Instagram, and acted like it was just something Brandon pulled out of thin air. The worst part, I was proud of them. I actually wanted them to have a beautiful start, but apparently the ugly brother didn't fit the theme. And now with 4 days to go, the clock was ticking. They were scrambling to find a new venue. And I knew how that process looked from the inside. Nothing decent was available at that short notice, especially not one that could accommodate the number of guests they were expecting. Even if they found a backup, everything from their floral arrangements to their ceremony setup would have to be redone. And the real kicker? They bragged for months about the custom package they negotiated at Lakeview Ridge. What they didn't know was that the coordinator Amy gave them that rate because I told her to. I wanted to gift it without the awkwardness. Now that the booking was void, that rate was gone. If they did manage to rebook, it would cost them double if we let them back in at all. I got another call that afternoon, this time from Brandon. Hey Kevin, listen, I know there's been some tension, but I wanted to clear the air. Man to man. I said nothing, letting him twist in the silence. He cleared his throat. Look, Rachel's been really upset this wedding. It means a lot to her, to both of us. I'm sure we can figure something out, right? Like you have connections at the venue. You could pull a few strings to get us back in Brandon. I said calmly, did you know I was the one paying for your honeymoon? He was quiet for a second. What? The honeymoon? The resort package you two posted about, the one with the villa and the private chef? That was me. $400 to $200. I sent it 2 months ago. I know I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. I said because your fiancé didn't want you to. She told me I'd ruin the photos, that she didn't want me there, so I took back the honeymoon. And now you're asking me to step in and rescue the wedding. Another pause. I imagined him sitting there staring at the wall like a kid realizing he hadn't done the homework. I'm not trying to take sides, he said, his voice quieter. But I don't think you understand how stressed Rachel is. This is her day. I almost laughed. Oh, I understand. I just don't care anymore. Click. 3 hours later, I got an email from Amy with the subject line update on Carson's. I opened it. In short, Rachel had called the venue, sobbing, claimed she was blindsided by the cancellation, that it was unfair and completely unethical. She demanded to speak to the owner directly. Amy asked if I wanted to respond personally. I told her not yet. Instead, I did something better. I logged into the venue's website backend and added a small update to their homepage. Please note, Lakeview Ridge is proud to host a private corporate event on April 27th. No wedding bookings will be honored on this date. That was their wedding day. I didn't use their names. I didn't have to. Anyone looking for a last-minute rebooking would see it. Every other venue in the area would assume we were booked solid. I just quietly turned off the lights on every backup plan they had that night. My app messaged me and Claire texted. Hi, sweetheart. Can we talk? Rachel is devastated. Your mom is beside herself. I stared at it for a while, I replied. She said I'd ruined her photos. I took that seriously. She left me on read. The next morning, the group chat lit up. Not mine, theirs. My cousin forwarded me screenshots. My mom was furious, blaming me, blaming Amy, blaming Mercury in retrograde. For all I know, she ranted about how this wasn't how family treated each other. How she'd bent over backwards to include me. Rachel chimed in with a gem. He's been jealous since high school. I always knew he'd find a way to make it about him jealous. That word hit like a slap and a punch wrapped in silk. Jealous of what? Us. The curated spotlight. She lived under the endless stream of fake compliments and whispered betrayals. I had built everything I owned by working quietly while they posed for pictures. I gave without asking for credit. And now apparently I was bitter for not letting them set me on fire one more time. So I made a choice. I forwarded everything to Amy and said, you can respond now. Tell them the owner reviewed the situation and denied the rebooking her policy. Then I picked up the phone and made one more call. A friend of mine named Carter runs a high-end catering company downtown. He owed me a favor. I asked him for a little something for Saturday. Nothing big, just a modest corporate luncheon, 10 people, same day. Same time, same venue. He laughed. You want me to book the place out on their wedding day? Not just book it. I said, I want photos, Instagram, the works. Tag the venue, hashtag the event. Make it look like the best catered celebration of the year. He was quiet for a second. Damn, Kevin, you're really doing this, I smiled. They asked me not to show up to the wedding, so I won't. But that didn't mean I wouldn't leave my mark. Saturday arrived with the kind of weather brides pray for. Crisp air, not a cloud in sight. Soft sunlight filtering through early spring leaves. The lake at Lakeview Ridge was still reflective like glass, and the white gazebo gleamed against a backdrop of budding cherry blossoms. It was perfect. Idyllic and not at all what Rachel was expecting. I got up early that morning not because I needed to, but because I wanted to savor every minute. I took my time showering, brewed the good coffee, even ironed my shirt not to wear just to feel a little sharper. Then I sat by the window, phone in hand, watching the chaos unfold in real time. The first post came from a distant cousin, Rachel's college roommate. A confused selfie in her car. Is the venue closed? Just got here and no one's answering the gate? Please tell me I'm not the only one who didn't get a cancellation notice. I sipped my coffee, refreshed the tag. More followed. Bridesmaids in full makeup. Standing outside the locked gate with their arms crossed. Groomsmen in rental tuxedos. Pacing beside parked cars, a flower girl asleep in someone's back seat. Her tiara sliding off. They hadn't told anyone. That was the part one hadn't expected. I figured Rachel or my mother would have done damage control. At least send out a mass text. But no, they were so convinced everything would work out. So sure someone me would swoop in to save them at the last second that they hadn't even warned their guests. Entitlement turned to paralysis. Then came the post that made me laugh out loud. Lakeview Ridge hosting a beautiful lakeside luncheon for a special team today. Nothing like a little sun, spring air, and great food to celebrate big wins. Hashtag private event. Hashtag booked out. Hashtag corporate luxury. 3 long tables draped in white crystal glassware, waiters in black vests, a champagne pyramid in the background. Barely visible but unmistakable was Rachel's custom floral arch, now repurposed for our luncheon's dessert bar. The sign she had painted by an Etsy artist, "Forever Starts Here," was flipped, and were lettered by Carter's team to say "Success starts here." I wish I could have seen her face around noon. I got a call from Amy. I picked up immediately. "Kevin," she said, barely containing a chuckle. "We have guests trying to climb the side gate." I laughed. "Please tell me that's a joke." "Nope. One of the groomsmen swears he knows someone inside." I told them the property is under private booking and that security has been notified. They bring the doves. Oh yes, 2 handlers and a crate. They're sitting on the curb, looking very confused. I chuckled again, slower this time. "You've been amazing, Amy. Really, I owe you big for this." "You don't owe me anything," she said. "This is the best Saturday shift I've had in years." At 2:41 p.m., the inevitable happened. My mom called, I let it ring, then Rachel, then Brandon, then my aunt. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I opened the group text, the one I was still silently in. Even though they'd stopped tagging me months ago, and typed exactly 2 words, "You're welcome." Then I left the chat. That night I heard from Eric, my younger brother, the only one in the family who'd ever treated me like an actual person. He wasn't at the wedding. He called me the day after I pulled the honeymoon fund. Said if they're going to act like you don't exist, I'm not pretending they're saints. He stayed quiet, respectful, but I could hear in his voice he'd had enough. 2. His message was short. "Eric, I saw the post. I don't even know what to say. But I'm proud of you. They needed to be humbled. I'll call tomorrow." And for once I felt it. Not just pride, not just relief, closure. Because here's the thing. People like Rachel, like my mother, they build their world on optics, on appearances, the seating charts, the dress fittings, the stories they'll tell over a drink in 5 years. What I gave them wasn't just a ruined wedding. It was a shattered illusion. No one would remember how stunning her dress was. They'd remember standing outside a locked venue in heels for 2 hours. They'd remember the doves that never flew, the brunch that was served to a corporate team while the wedding guests stood in the parking lot, the whispered questions. Why didn't they pay? Didn't they have help? And eventually someone would point out that maybe Rachel wasn't the victim. Maybe the brother she tried to erase had simply said enough. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She pounded. I waited a minute, then opened it slowly. She looked exhausted. Her mascara had dried into the wrinkles beneath her eyes. Her blazer was wrinkled, her posture hunched, but her tone still sharp. "You think you proved something?" she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I know I did. You humiliated your sister." I looked at her for a long time. "She humiliated me. You did too for years. You just thought I'd keep taking it, that I'd always show up, clean up, and keep quiet. Not anymore." She stepped forward like she wanted to argue, like she had a speech prepared. But I didn't give her the space. "I bought the venue. I paid for the honeymoon. I supported this family when no one else did. And you erased me for optics, so this time you got erased." She stood there trembling, but she didn't say anything else. Finally I added, "You can tell Rachel I'm not angry. I'm free. That's a better gift than anything on a registry." And I shut the door. A month passed then too. I didn't hear from them. Eric and I grab dinner twice a week now. We talked about work, about life. Sometimes we even laughed about the great wedding disaster of the year. I'd gotten a few sly messages from people who had been at the event congratulating me without really saying what they were congratulating me for. And that was enough. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need a public moment. I had peace. I had power. And for the first time in years, I had a family that I chose, not the one that tried to write me out of their perfect picture. So I took the frame and I burned it.